During World War II, there were crops so productive, so reliable, that families planted them once and harvested food for 20 years without replanting. No annual seed purchases, no yearly tilling, no dependency on stores or catalogs or corporations. Just food growing year after year from a single planting. Soldiers brought these seeds home from Europe. Families traded them across neighborhoods. Victory gardens overflowed with perennial vegetables that came back every spring stronger than before. Then something strange happened. By 1955, these crops began disappearing from seed catalogs. By 1965, most garden centers had never heard of them. By 1975, agricultural schools stopped mentioning they existed. Today, 90% of gardeners have never seen these plants, never tasted them, never known they were possible. This wasn't an accident. This was business. The seed industry makes money when you buy seeds every year. The fertilizer industry makes money when you till soil and destroy biology every season. The grocery industry makes money when you depend on stores instead of your backyard. A crop that produces for 20 years from one planting is a crop that eliminates 20 years of purchases. They couldn't let that happen. In this video, we're uncovering 13 World War II perennial crops that were deliberately removed from seed catalogs, crops that still exist, hidden in seed libraries and old farmsteads, crops that your grandparents grew but you were never told about. By the end, you'll know what they erased, and you'll know where to find it again. Number 1. Egyptian walking onions. In the Victory Gardens of 1943, one onion variety spread through neighborhoods faster than any other. Families called it the walking onion because it literally moved across the garden, planting itself year after year without human help. Egyptian walking onions produce bulbs at the top of their stalks instead of flowers. When the stalk gets heavy, it bends over and touches the ground. The top bulbs root where they land, creating new plants a foot or two from the mother. Over years, the onion colony walks across your garden, producing endless harvests from a single original planting. Every part is edible. The underground bulbs taste like sharp green onions. The green stalks work like scallions. The top bulbils can be pickled, cooked, or planted. One plant becomes 10, 10 becomes 100. Within 5 years, a single Egyptian walking onion can populate an entire garden bed. During World War II, families loved them because they required zero annual work. No seed starting, no transplanting, no buying anything ever again. The onions simply existed, multiplying themselves, providing food through depression, war, and uncertainty. By 1960, Egyptian walking onions had vanished from major seed catalogs. They still exist in heirloom collections and specialty nurseries, but the mainstream seed industry pretends they never happened. Because an onion you buy once is an onion you never buy again. Number 2, sea kale. Before World War II, sea kale was one of the most popular perennial vegetables in Europe. Families blanched the spring shoots like asparagus and harvested them for decades from a single planting. The plant was so productive that Thomas Jefferson grew it at Monticello and wrote letters praising its reliability. Sea kale grows wild on European coastlines, tolerating salt, sand, and neglect that would kill most vegetables. Once established, it returns every spring with tender shoots that taste like a cross between asparagus and cabbage. The roots penetrate deep into soil, finding moisture and nutrients that shallow-rooted annuals can't reach. During World War II, Victory gardeners grew sea kale in permanent beds, harvesting year after year while neighbors replanted annual crops every spring. A single planting could produce for 15 to 20 years, requiring nothing but occasional mulch and an annual harvest. After the war, sea kale disappeared from American seed catalogs almost completely. Today, most gardeners have never heard of it, but the plant still exists in coastal areas of Europe, in botanical gardens, and in the collections of perennial vegetable enthusiasts who refuse to let corporations decide what they're allowed to grow. Number 3, Good King Henry. For over 1,000 years, Good King Henry was the spinach of Europe. Families grew it in permanent patches that lasted generations. The leaves, shoots, and flower buds were all edible, providing 3 different harvests from one plant across the growing season. The plant earned its name from folklore, linking it to benevolent King Henry IV, though the connection is probably myth. What isn't myth is its productivity. A patch of Good King Henry, once established, produces spring shoots like asparagus, summer leaves like spinach, and fall flower buds like broccoli, all from plants that return year after year without replanting. During World War II, families valued Good King Henry for its reliability during uncertain times. Unlike annual spinach that bolts in summer heat, this perennial keeps producing. Unlike crops that need replanting after harvest, it simply regrows. One planting in 1942 could still be feeding a family in 1962. After the war, Good King Henry vanished from mainstream commerce. The seed industry replaced it with annual spinach varieties that needed purchasing every single year. Today, finding Good King Henry requires searching specialty seed companies and heirloom preservation networks, but it still grows and it still produces, for anyone willing to look. Number 4, Turkish rocket. Turkish rocket is a perennial green that produces harvestable leaves from early spring until hard frost. While annual salad greens come and go, requiring constant succession planting, Turkish rocket just keeps growing month after month, year after year. The leaves have a pleasant peppery flavor, milder than arugula, but more interesting than lettuce. Young leaves work in salads. Older leaves cook like mustard greens. And the plant doesn't care about your schedule. Skip a harvest for 2 weeks and it's still there, still growing, still waiting. During World War II, gardeners grew Turkish rocket as a permanent salad source. One planting provided greens for a decade or more. No seed starting in trays, no hardening off seedlings, no transplant shock. Just walk outside and harvest, spring through fall, year after year. The seed industry couldn't profit from a plant you bought once and harvested forever. Turkish rocket was quietly dropped from catalogs and replaced with annual greens that needed replanting every few weeks. Most modern gardeners spend more time starting lettuce seeds than harvesting salad. Turkish rocket would have eliminated that work entirely. Number 5. Skirret. Before potatoes conquered Europe, skirret was the root vegetable of choice. This sweet, white-rooted perennial was grown in monastery gardens for centuries. Once planted, it divided and spread, producing more roots every year without replanting. Skirret roots taste like a cross between parsnip and carrot, but sweeter. They can be roasted, mashed, or added to soups and stews. And unlike annual root crops that must be completely harvested each fall, skirret just needs thinning. Take what you want, leave the rest. The plant regrows from remaining root divisions. During World War II, families rediscovered skirret when other vegetables became scarce. It required no annual seed purchases, tolerated neglect, and produced in partial shade where other crops failed. Some Victory Garden skirret patches produced continuously for 15 years or more. After the war, the potato industry had no interest in competition from a superior perennial. Skirret disappeared from seed catalogs so completely that most modern gardeners have never heard the name, but medieval farmers knew, and World War II families remembered. The plant still exists for anyone willing to search beyond mainstream sources. Number 6. Scorzonera. Scorzonera is a perennial root vegetable that produces black-skinned roots with white flesh tasting like oysters. Seriously, the flavor is so similar that it earned the nickname vegetable oyster centuries ago. The plant grows easily from seed, then returns year after year. Roots can be harvested anytime from fall through early spring. Take some, leave others, and the remaining plants multiply. A small initial planting becomes a permanent food source within a few years. World War II families in occupied Europe survived on Scorzonera when other foods vanished. The roots stored well in ground through winter, available for digging whenever needed. No root cellars required, no canning or preserving. Just leave them in the soil and harvest fresh all winter long. American Victory gardeners who tried Scorzonera became devoted converts. But after the war, the vegetable quietly disappeared from catalogs. Today, finding Scorzonera seeds requires specialty suppliers. The mainstream industry decided you don't need a perennial root vegetable that eliminates decades of seed purchases. Number 7. Ramps. Ramps are wild perennial onions native to North American forests. Indigenous peoples harvested them for thousands of years. Early colonists depended on them as the first fresh food after long winters. In World War II, families foraged and transplanted them into permanent garden patches. The flavor combines onion and garlic with something wild and green that domesticated alliums can't match. Both the leaves and bulbs are edible. Spring harvests provide intense flavor for cooking after months of stored food. And once established, ramps multiply slowly but steadily, producing larger patches year after year. Ramps grow in shaded forest conditions where most vegetables fail. A patch under trees, on a north-facing slope, in soil too poor for annual crops, can produce ramps indefinitely. World War II families created ramp patches that their grandchildren still harvest today. The commercial food industry couldn't figure out how to profit from a forest plant that spreads itself. Ramps never entered mainstream seed catalogs. Today, they're trendy in high-end restaurants, but almost unknown in home gardens. Meanwhile, wild patches that have existed for centuries continue producing, asking nothing, providing everything. Number 8. Lovage. Lovage is a perennial herb that tastes like concentrated celery. One plant grows 6 feet tall, produces pounds of leaves and stalks, and returns every spring larger than before. A single lovage plant can replace an entire row of annual celery. The flavor is stronger than celery, so less is needed. Leaves add depth to soups and stews. Stalks can be eaten raw or cooked. Seeds work as a spice. Roots are even used medicinally. Every part of the plant serves a purpose, and the plant itself lives for decades. World War II. Victory gardens often featured lovage as a permanent celery substitute. While annual celery required careful growing conditions and constant attention, lovage thrived on neglect. Plant it once, ignore it forever, harvest whenever needed. Modern seed catalogs carry lovage as an herb, but rarely mention its potential as a celery replacement. The celery industry wouldn't appreciate losing customers to a perennial alternative. Most gardeners plant annual celery yearly without knowing that a single Lovage plant could solve the problem permanently. Number 9. Caucasian spinach. Caucasian spinach is a perennial vine that produces spinach-like leaves from a single planting for 10 to 15 years. Unlike annual spinach that bolts in summer heat, this perennial keeps producing through conditions that would end regular spinach harvests. The plant is actually a type of bellflower, not true spinach, but the leaves taste similar and serve identical culinary purposes. It climbs fences and trellises, producing leaves at easy picking height. No bending over, no stooping in the dirt. Just walk along the fence and harvest. World War II. Gardeners in southern regions loved Caucasian spinach because it solved the summer greens problem. When annual spinach bolted and turned bitter in June, Caucasian spinach kept producing tender leaves through the hottest months. One vine could feed a family all season from a single planting years before. After the war, Caucasian spinach never entered mainstream commerce. Annual spinach remained the standard, requiring spring and fall plantings, succession sowing, and constant purchasing of new seed. The perennial alternative was simply forgotten, surviving only in scattered collections of gardeners who knew better. Number 10. Welsh onions. Welsh onions are perennial bunching onions that never form bulbs but produce green onion tops continuously for years. Plant them once and harvest scallions forever. No annual replanting, no seed starting, no waiting. The plants form clumps that expand yearly. Division creates more plants. A dozen Welsh onions become 100 within a few years. Each clump produces harvestable greens multiple times per season, regrowing after cutting like chives on steroids. World War II, families grew Welsh onions as permanent scallion sources. While neighbors bought bunching onion seeds every spring, Welsh onion growers just walked outside and cut what they needed. The plant survived winters that killed annual crops and returned each spring without any human intervention. Today, Welsh onions exist in heirloom collections and some specialty nurseries, but mainstream seed catalogs push annual bunching onions that die after harvest, requiring repurchase every season. The perennial alternative remains hidden from gardeners who would never buy onion seeds again if they knew it existed. Number 11. Jerusalem artichokes. Jerusalem artichokes are perennial sunflowers that produce edible tubers instead of seeds. Plant them once and dig tubers every fall forever. They spread aggressively, colonizing any space given to them, producing more food each year than the previous. The tubers taste like nutty, sweet potatoes. They store starches as inulin instead of glucose, making them popular with diabetics. And they require absolutely nothing. No fertilizer, no watering, no pest control. The plants simply grow, spread, and produce. World War II. Families grew Jerusalem artichokes in corners and edges where nothing else would thrive. Poor soil, partial shade, complete neglect. The plants didn't care. They produced tubers regardless. Some wartime patches still exist today, 80 years later, never replanted, still producing. The commercial potato industry couldn't compete with a perennial that never needed replanting. Jerusalem artichokes were marginalized, treated as a novelty rather than a staple, but anyone who grows them knows the truth. Plant once, harvest forever. Never buy seed potatoes again. Number 12. Sorrel. Sorrel is a perennial green with a bright lemony flavor that wakes up any salad or soup. The plants return every spring, producing harvestable leaves from early spring through late fall. One planting lasts 15 years or more. The tangy flavor comes from oxalic acid, the same compound in spinach but more pronounced. A few leaves add brightness to salads. Cooked leaves make traditional European sorrel soup. The flavor is unique enough that nothing else substitutes. World War II gardeners grew sorrel as a permanent salad ingredient. While other greens required constant replanting, sorrel just existed, year after year, ready for harvest whenever needed. The plants tolerated partial shade, poor soil, and gardener absence. Modern herb sections sometimes carry sorrel plants, but it's rarely promoted as the permanent salad green it is. Annual lettuce dominates American gardens, while perennial sorrel sits unknown. The gardening industry prefers crops you have to replant. Sorrel doesn't fit that model. Number 13. Multiplier onions. Multiplier onions are perennials that reproduce by division instead of seed. Plant one bulb, harvest 6 next year. Plant those 6, harvest 36 the following year. The multiplication continues indefinitely, never requiring seed purchase again. Different varieties produce at different rates. Potato onions, shallot types, and other multipliers all share the trait of exponential reproduction. A few bulbs from a neighbor become a lifetime supply within a few years. Free onions, forever, from a single starting investment. World War II families traded multiplier onions across communities. One family's surplus became another family's starter stock. Networks of growers maintained varieties through the war years, never buying seeds, never depending on catalogs or stores. After the war, the seed industry promoted hybrid onions from seed. Multiplier onions were forgotten by everyone except small communities of heirloom growers who kept dividing and sharing. Today, finding multiplier onions requires searching those communities, but the onions still multiply, still produce, still free. These 13 crops share one thing that the seed industry hates. They make you independent. Plant them once and you're done. No annual purchases, no dependency on supply chains, no corporate control over your food. Just plants doing what plants did for thousands of years before someone figured out how to make that inconvenient for profits. The removal wasn't violent, it was quiet. Catalogs simply stopped listing these varieties. Garden centers stopped stocking them. Agricultural schools stopped teaching them. Within a generation, knowledge that had sustained families through the hardest times in history simply vanished. But here's what they didn't count on. Seeds survive. Knowledge persists. And people like you are starting to ask why your grandparents could feed themselves from gardens that needed planting once, while you buy seeds every single year. The perennial crops still exist. Seed libraries preserve them. Heirloom growers trade them. Small nurseries sell them. Everything your great-grandmother grew is still available for anyone willing to look beyond what corporations want you to see. One season of finding and planting these crops changes everything. Next year, they come back. The year after, they spread. Within 5 years, you have food sources that will outlive you, feeding your children and grandchildren from your single act of planting. That's what they tried to erase. That's what the seed industry hopes you never discover. Now you know. What you do with this knowledge is up to you. Subscribe for more secrets they don't want you to have. Share this with everyone growing food or thinking about starting. Because every garden planted with perennials is a garden that never needs the industry again. I'll see you in the next video.